Hi everyone, it's Michael, and it's already time for the November 2020 Orchid Collection update, which I don't really know how I feel about that. It's so bizarre how this pandemic has impacted my sense of time, because it feels like it's way too early to almost be December, but it also feels like this chapter has gone on for eternity. So I hope you are all hanging in there and staying happy and healthy. Know that I'm sending so much love and positivity and light your way. Let's talk about some orchids. This month has been, a continuation of the very positive momentum from last month. So many things are in bloom, and frankly, this is the first time I've ever really enjoyed this kind of a chapter with my orchid collection because I've relocated so many times. There's been so many radical shifts to how I grow and my system, but this is the first time I've been really consistent with my grow methodology and haven't traumatized the plants by moving or having to unpot every single one. And it's just really nice to have so many things in bloom. This is what we work towards as orchid growers, to just always have beauty to enjoy in our homes. And there is so much happening right now, and I can't wait to share it with you. So just to offer a quick overview of my system this month, it is exactly the same as last month. So I am continuing to flush all of the orchid containers once to twice a month using tap water. Reminder, my tap water here is incredibly soft. It has a TDS of about 6, which is comparable to reverse osmosis or even distilled water. In between those flushes, I am watering with a dilute nutrient solution, and I am continuing to mist the plants every single morning. And having said all of that, let's just go ahead and jump in and take a look at the plants that have something new, different, and interesting happening this month. All right, my friends, jumping in with number 1 in my collection. This is my NoID mini Phalaenopsis. And the only thing I'm really showcasing on this one is how cute it is. Ugh. Again, this was the very first orchid in my entire collection, so it's amazing it didn't die. After all of the mistreatment, it suffered. But it's so happy, it's so vigorous. The root system is, as you can see, quite expansive and just going crazy. Such a joy to see this one in bloom. Now jumping to number 7 in the collection, this is my Dendrobium Nobile to my kids. It's a very consistent bloomer for me. What I wanted to highlight here is some of the very, very old canes are beginning to die back, which is totally normal. That's just kind of how it goes. So once it loses its leaves, because these plants are deciduous, it retains the old canes, kind of like a battery pack, but over time it'll eventually drain all of the power out of that pack and then the cane will die. Now what I wanted to highlight here is not that the canes are dying, but something interesting that is happening for the very first time. One of the dying canes that's really old is giving me Cakeys, which is really bizarre and unexpected. I mean, I've had this plant for over 3 years and I've never seen it do this. So it is kind of interesting that it is still trying to asexually propagate itself off of a dying cane. So it's just kind of peculiar. I'm not unhappy about it. I just think it's a strange deviation from its usual behavior, which is so interesting. Now jumping to number 9 in the collection, this is one I haven't shown a whole lot, but it's actually a Cakey that I took from my mom a long, long time ago. Again, over 3 years ago. And this one also suffered the same mistreatment 1 and 7 did. It suffered Physand experiments. It suffered with a lot of different problems. And it's interesting because I've always kept it in kind of a low, bright light area, close to a window, but not getting any real meaningful contact with the sun. And finally I was like, okay, either get better and more vigorous or die. And so I put it directly under the grow light, and look, like you can see, especially if I take you in on top of it, how much more vigorous and happy this new leaf is. It's so, so turgid. But then also look at the root system. It just suddenly started spitting out all of the, look, you can see, that new light really just coaxed out so much new root growth. And what excites me about that transition is it really reflects that sometimes it's not a matter of the root system being established, it's a matter of insufficient light. And I always used to have the perception that, the plant has to be really, really healthfully rooted before you give it sun exposure, otherwise it'll burn and die. But sometimes the thing that the plant needs the most in order to create that root system is the light. So just in case you had some misguided logic like me, wanted to kind of share that experience. Now jumping to a very exciting story, my Cycopsis mendenhallii. This is number 11 in my collection. But look, the new flower spike finally matured and now is in bloom. I mean, these blooms are just so insane. I can't get enough of them. Look how stunning. They call it a samurai orchid because it looks like a samurai carrying 3 swords behind him. Oh, look how beautiful it is. So I'm just so pleased to see this one in bloom. This is actually the old flower spike, and you can see as a sequential bloomer, it has another little bud coming in. But this plant has just been so remarkably consistent for me, and it's not one that I ever expected to do that. And I can tell you for sure, this is a new growth. It has a big, luscious new pseudobulb, and I know that this is gonna produce a third flower spike, and then we're really gonna get a show. I'm so excited. Moving on to number 12 in the collection, this is my Oxalotary Prince Phalaenopsis orchid. This one just recently finished blooming and then reblooming off of the same spike. Look how happy and vigorous and well-established this root system is. So well-established, in fact, that it has given me another flower spike very, very shortly after the last time it bloomed. And I just think that that's so exciting. The other thing that I really just love looking at on this plant is look at this root system. If I can take you in, do you see how it is growing around the glass? I don't know what it is that brings me such intense satisfaction of watching nature just literally wrap around inorganic man-made materials and just kind of triumph over it. And this orchid is, you know, it wants to crawl out of this container, it wants to live, and it wants to expand, and I just think that that's so beautiful. Look how happy it is. Ugh. Now moving on to number 13 in the collection. This one excites me so much. For years, this gorgeous, gorgeous flower, this entire plant existed in my collection as a NoID Phragmipedium. But after finally getting it to bloom, after all of this time, I was able to ask you, my fabulous community, hey, what do you think this is? So I got a lot of suggestions, you know, Frag Cardinal, close to a Professor Brame. And after cross-referencing tons and tons and tons of imagery, I do think that I was able to positively ID this as the Fragsiddeni. And, you know, to Michael McCarthy's point, this is a Schlimmy hybrid. I believe it's a longifolium pink crossed with a Schlimmy. And it is just so, so gorgeous. What I didn't know about this plant was that it is also, I don't know if I would describe it as a sequential bloomer, but it produces more and more and more flowers off of the same spike for an extended period of time. My understanding is that this can go on for weeks, it can even go on for months, and this one is already at the months portion. So I actually saved the 2 blooms, and this plant produced those blooms off of these 2 spots here. Now this plant has an interesting temperament. When the flower drops, it doesn't start to wilt before it drops. It drops perfectly intact. So it just looks like the flower was cut or fell. It's really, really interesting and so beautiful. And I don't actually know how long this will go on because this is the 3rd bloom in the sequence. There's, as you can see up top, a 4th bloom, and then there's another sheath right behind it. So I think it can go on for quite some time if the plant is in good health. And you know, on the other fan over here, we have the first one just beginning to peek its head open. Let's see if I can rotate it for you. But it is just doing so well. And I'm so pleased to see this finally in bloom. Look at this root system. It is just chock full. It looks like a bowl of ramen. It is so happy, it is so vigorous, and I'm just so pleased to see it doing so well. Now jumping to the infuriating and powerful number 16 in my collection, my Dapper Dots Nicolaucetaverus Catacetum. I have, as I mentioned, forced this one into dormancy. You know, if you're unfamiliar with the growth temperament of Catacetums, this might look alarming to you. But again, this plant is deciduous, so this is intended to happen. It'll drop all of its leaves every year. And I'm pleased because last year I abstained from doing a hard cutoff on watering because I thought that it was going to impact the flower spikes. But you know what? It just caused this plant to get confused about what time of year it is and really exacerbated the issues I was experiencing with it. So this year I did a hard cutoff right after Halloween, and it seems to be going really, really well. It's almost completely in dormancy. It's much more manageable when there aren't 1,001 leaves. Now jumping to number 18 in the collection, can you believe it? I never thought I'd see the day my Zygopetalum bloomed for me. But what a little brat. Oh, you're such a brat. This one, of course, just, it refuses to cooperate with me and it refuses to be understood by me. So this one has gone through so many different things. It was in semi-hydro and it didn't particularly like it. So then I did a top dressing of sphagnum moss and it was good, but it wasn't enough for it. Then I repotted it exclusively into sphagnum moss. And then the entire plant after that just decides to start growing outside of the container. Look at this. So now this one is like, it just wants to do whatever it wants to do. And right before I saw the flower spike emerge, I was about to repot it into water culture. But you know, if the plant is growing with its roots out in the open air, you know, I think it could potentially do well in water culture so long as I make sure that the water level isn't too high. But I don't know what to do with this, honestly. It's so peculiar. It is the first time that I've ever seen it really give me any real meaningful or positive momentum. So I don't want to mess with it, but Like, what do you want? This one just will not. It's so funny because I've come to the point with this one many times where I'm like, I just need to give it away because it frustrates me too intensely. But it always gives me just enough to keep me invested. It is, and I mean, these blooms are just so gorgeous and fragrant. Oh, so stunning. Now jumping to number 26 in the collection, this is not a happy story. This is my Alisara Stellar, and this one bloomed for me once so beautifully. You can check it out on my bloom profiles. And ever since, it just did really, really poorly. It was doing great in Colorado in Semi-Hydroponics. And I don't know if it was the way I packaged it and shipped it. I don't know what exactly went wrong with this plant, but after I moved from Colorado, it just never quite recovered. I have potted and repotted this one, which I'm sure, exacerbated the issue and stressed it out. But finally, you remember I was talking earlier about kind of the battery packs of former canes on number 7. Similarly, when you have pseudobulbs that have lost all their leaves, those are operating as battery packs as well. And that is what has sustained this plant to making these 2 very, very tiny, almost insignificant growths. It made 1 tiny pseudobulb last year, and it's doing 1 little growth here. But I do think this plant's time is running out because all of the battery packs are now rotting. You can see that they've become squishy. So I think we'll be seeing an In Loving Memory video for this one soon, which is, what's crazy? I haven't filmed an In Loving Memory video since February of 2019, which is almost 2 years ago, because I haven't lost a plant since then. So even though this breaks my heart, I feel like my rates are pretty good, and I have learned and I've grown so much. So even as I see this one approach its demise, I feel good about the lessons that I have learned in the process of caring for it. And, sometimes it's just time to say goodbye, which is so sad. Now moving on to number 28 in the collection. I love you so much. Oh my gosh, I love my Cattleya Purple Blue Hawaii Mini. It is just one of the most joyous plants in my collection. Such a consistent bloomer. It just gave me 2 blooms that, bloomed and dropped, and then it gave me this spike with 2 more blooms. It's so fragrant, it's so lovely, and just doing so well. Now, something that I do want to highlight here is its babies. So I have one of the divisions here, I've got another one of the divisions here. But what's interesting is this plant was in sphagnum moss, because I told you I was experimenting with the divisions, and it was doing okay, but never really quite thrived. And then I converted it to Semi-Hydroponics, and it immediately, here, maybe I'll just set this down. It immediately started doing much, much better. You can see putting down all of those lovely new green root tips, and it really just came to occupy the entire container. Same thing here. This one I was growing in water culture, and it was doing okay. It certainly wasn't thrilled about it. And then I put it into Semi-Hydro, and it just put out tons and tons of new green root tips, and I mean everywhere in the container. So what I'm really trying to showcase by sharing all of that with you is that this plant really has a penchant, a preference for Semi-Hydroponics. Against every other grow method I've tried with it, it just really does seem to thrive in this environment. So now, after all of this time and after all of this experimentation, I feel like this is the method that I'm gonna commit to. Now on to number 31. I just did a bloom profile for this plant this month, and you can see it in my bloom profiles playlist. But what's interesting is, again, it gave me this entire flower spike. It bloomed, it appeared as if the bloom was all dying back, and then it put out these 2 branches, and then gave me an entire secondary set of blooms. It's just so interesting and peculiar. And again, this is a plant that I've had for 3 years, and it's the first time it's ever done that. I don't know why, I don't know what the genetic function would be of doing something like that, but I'm certainly not upset about getting to enjoy these blooms and this gorgeous fragrance for a few more weeks. So, so lovely. Now jumping to number 36 in the collection, this is my Fred Clarkiara After Dark SVO Black Pearl, and I wanted to showcase, this is what the plant looks like after a very successful transition to dormancy. This one did so well, and really it does every year when it comes to accepting dormancy. It just slowly and systematically dropped all of its leaves, and now it's just a beautiful, bare little growth. And I will say that when it goes into dormancy, that's the true measure of how successful you've been that grow season, because you see the growth so much more clearly. And especially when I compare it to previous year's growths, look how gigantic this year has been. So, so positive, so lovely, hoping to see flower spikes on this one soon. Now moving on to number 41 in my collection, this is my Ganlin Golden Apple. And this was a Cakey that I took from a friend's plant a long time ago, and it is just doing so well. It's so beautiful. But I did make a video last month about really reducing the size of your orchid collection. And as much as I love this plant and as beautiful as it is, it's not one that I think that I am positively obsessed with. So what I think I'm gonna do is probably package this up after it's done blooming and send it along to my friend Jennifer, because she was the one that I took the Cakey from. She has a passion for orchids, and I think I want to give her an opportunity to grow this plant now that it is happy and well adjusted and really acclimated to semi-hydroponics. I think she'll be very successful with this plant in this new method. Now moving on to number 43 in the collection, I get so many questions and requests to show what happened with my Orchid Flask experiment. And I regret to inform you, this is the only one I left in my collection. Now I did 2 Orchid Flasks, one of which all of the seedlings passed away when I was still, I believe, in Los Angeles. It was a long time ago. But the Encyclia tampensis, which is this one did really well, and all of them did really well. So slowly but surely I regifted and rehomed all of the other ones. But it's peculiar because this is still a baby plant, but look how much more vigorous this root system is. Now this one I tried to grow in semi-hydroponics, and it just didn't particularly care for it. So I finally pulled it out and I put it into water culture, and immediately it just started pooping out tons and tons of new roots. So I'm wondering, now that it has all of these vigorous green starts, if I could put it back into semi-hydro. I wonder if that would kill the plant. I'm concerned about undoing all of the progress I've just made with it. But I think what I'm just gonna do is study the general cultivation method of what an adult plant would prefer, and make my decisions based off of that. So we'll see how things progress with this one. Now on to number 46 in the collection. This is my Oncidium Twinkle White Pink Mini, and so surprising. I feel like this one was just in bloom, but look who has already given me a significant and sizable flower spike off of the new pseudobulb. And I do believe that this one will probably double spike, so I'm waiting on another spike to come out from that side. And I have these 2 new growths, which I also believe will double spike. So this plant has been doing fantastic for me. That top dressing of sphagnum moss really encouraged a crazy flush of roots to come out. And I'm not messing with it. I'm just gonna let it keep doing its thing. Jumping back in with number 59 in the collection, this is my Cloesia Rebecca Northern Maccabi. And I just wanna highlight how much better it has done this grow season than previous grow seasons. I mean, the size difference is really crazy. But this one is also being transitioned into dormancy, just like its other Catacetum type siblings. You can see it's already dropped 1 of its leaves. It has 4 more to go. And then hopefully we'll see some beautiful flowers. I don't think it'll be a problem this year. I mean, it is so vigorous and has done so well. Now jumping to number 60 in the collection, this is my Ballara Peggy Ruth Carpenter, and this one has become such a reliable bloomer for me. As always, it gives me that first flower spike that only gives you 1 bloom. It does this every single year when it goes into spike. And then it gives me a second fully realized flower spike. And that one just began to open here. It is just so lovely. It's so beautiful and so consistent. It's peculiar though, because one of the flower buds did blast, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if you see it right there. Actually, I'm sure I can just pull it off. So it's this one right here. And it's peculiar because it's like, why did that even happen? I'm not sure what circumstances caused it to abort, but it's sad because I would have had 6 blooms on this guy, but I guess I'll just have to settle for 5. I'm so curious to know what the internal reasoning is for these things, because I know that there is a function. There's a reason that this plant said, hey, I'm gonna divert energy from that bloom. And I'm just curious to know what it is, if I had any hand in it, but it seems so randomized as an outsider looking in, so who knows? Also, something interesting on this plant is another one of the new growths has flower spikes coming in. You can see over here, which is so exciting. And I was like, oh, I wonder when the other one is gonna come out. I just realized it got stuck because I haven't done a great job about keeping the humidity elevated for this one. And I think that's causing it to stick on itself a bit. So sometimes when you see things like this, or when you see accordion patterns on the leaves, or you notice that new leaves are getting stuck into themselves instead of opening all the way up, it's because the ambient humidity isn't high enough to really facilitate or, I don't know, lubricate the new leaves into opening properly. So the easiest fix is just to elevate your ambient humidity or put it on a humidity tray. So that's something that I can do for this one to make it go a little bit more smoothly. And last but not least, we're moving on to number 67 in the collection. This is my Epidendrum Hybrid Rose. And this one has done marvelously in water culture. I mean, the roots are so vigorous. It really took to it super quickly. And it shot out a flower spike really quickly. So I think that's a really positive sign. You can see that this one is a sequential bloomer. It is continuing to give me bloom after bloom. It's been in bloom for quite some time now, a few months. And I'm not sure when it will stop, But you can see the growth pattern here. The oldest blooms are at the base, and then it just continues to grow up and out of this beautiful little shrub. So as excited as I am to see these blooms, I am a bit concerned because when I look at the vegetative growth, I'm starting to see this discoloration, and I've seen this on a couple of my plants that are currently in water culture, and I wonder if this is a nutrient deficiency or something that is a product of being in that cultivation method. So I'm not quite sure what this means, but this is also in part why I haven't made a final decision on water culture. While it has been incredibly advantageous for a lot of plants, I am seeing now, after, I don't know, 2-3 months of trying this cultivation method, I'm seeing some potential drawbacks, but I need to evaluate them more carefully before I can make an informed statement about it. So stay tuned on this. I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do yet. And with that, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much as always for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. Be sure to support one another in the comments section because I'm so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye, friends.